Welcome to the initial episode of the Revolution and Ideology podcast. My name is Nick Lee.
And I'm Jared Benson.
In this episode, we're just going to briefly discuss why we decided to start this podcast, what our goals are here, sort of what we'll be doing, and how we arrived at a point where we decided we wanted to put our voices out there on the airwaves.
So, both of us teach various courses at the University of Colorado Springs, and a lot of the courses explore different content, and they've evolved over time. But most of the content they explore is the ideas of challenging systems of power, how power comes to be power, how it perpetuates itself, and what society may or may not look like if we are ever successful in challenging various institutions and systems of power. So what we wanted to do with this podcast is we are developing a third class in a series of classes we've been teaching for a long time. And we wanted to be able to, as we develop this class, explore through research, maybe through discussion with each other, what it may end up looking like, and hopefully figure out a way to disseminate information on a post-ideological or perhaps post-capitalist or whatever society. That's essentially what the goal is. So I guess what we need in this podcast is a little bit of background of how we arrived here. So I teach history, and Nick teaches sociology. And our interest in the various topics, again, of challenging systems of power and different narratives and so on and so forth, eventually led to us developing a class called Resistance and Revolution, which was based on a prior history class I had created. And long story short, we take both a historical and sociological look at revolutions of the past with an eye towards perhaps prompting, at least provoking different thoughts for what society looks like now and its potential for the future. And we started this, at this point, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, and the class has been going strong ever since. A little controversy here and there, but it's been a great class. We'll explore things like, how building narratives or challenging the prevailing ideologies of a time are important, but then, of course, that goes hand in hand with organization and a structuralist perspective. Sometimes it's just right place, right time. The ideas of revolutionary icons, from the Che Guevaras and Fidel Castros to the George Washingtons and the whoever else we could think of, the Mahatma Gandhi and so on and so forth. Anyway, that class, over time, ended up not feeling quite fulfilling. At the end of every semester, the students seemed to enjoy it, but as we began to learn more and dig deeper in our academic careers, we decided there needed to be a little bit more. So in that spirit, we decided to develop a second class that focused specifically on ideological construction for two purposes, both the ideological construction of state apparatus and the potential for ideological construction for resistance movements. And so that class has now been going strong for a couple of years, and we begin, or at least we try to begin, at the origin of human organization, going way back into the Neolithic revolutionary period, and end up in a modern capitalist society, and we explore a little bit of antithesis to capitalism, anarchism, socialism, communism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that class has also been going strong. But again, after teaching this one now for about 3 years, we've decided we want to go a little bit further. What is a post-ideological society looking like? And so the course in development is going to be titled Stateless Society, or Stateless Societies. And it is our research right now that we're in the research stage, and we're hoping to have the class developed and at least have its first draft run this summer. And so part of the process this time around, rather than just doing it between ourselves, is we wanted to make it a public process of researching and developing this course, and that's where we find ourselves in this podcast.
We were discussing how the course was going to go and what topics each of us would be presenting and discussing throughout the future semester, etc. And we sort of came to the conclusion that neither of our academic expertise falls in this arena of stateless societies, and I mean, to put it bluntly, we're talking about anarchism here. My academic background in sociology, my focus is on social theory and specifically Marxism. Jared's focus is on history, with an emphasis in American history, what he ends up teaching a lot, and Islamic history. And while we are both politically sort of leaning towards the anarchist tradition, neither of us have academic expertise in the theories, etc., that has to do with anarchism. So we really wanted to push ourselves outside the box to create this new class, and really personally to answer some questions I think that we sort of have for each other that we've never actually done research to try to answer. We've just sort of come to conclusions on our own through conversation and reading other material, etc. But the motivation for this class was really to dig deep and begin to answer those questions for ourselves. And then the inspiration for the podcast was to put ourselves out there, and as we're doing this research and as we're trying to answer these questions for ourselves, to bring in guests on the podcast, have the two of us discussing what we're finding in our research, topics that are central to the discussion of the potentiality of stateless societies, so we can get feedback from the public. They can sort of help us through this research project and the class as it comes into fruition, and really just kind of, I think it's rare for academics to make themselves sort of publicly vulnerable. And I want to emphasize that we're sort of putting ourselves out there and admitting that while we have academic expertise in various other arenas, this is not one of them. So we're going to be learning as we go along, and hopefully you'll be learning, the audience, right along with us, and helping us learn even further, directing us to resources, and helping us more solidify our ideas and our research. And so the goal for that is to us to be able to take that into the classroom this summer of 2019 and teach the class for the first time. Then our goal right after that will be to put the class online as well. And our goal in the long run is to put that class online not only for our students at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, but also to make a free version where anyone can access it at any time and navigate any of the materials or the modules or any of the content that we've created.
So we start every one of our semesters when we introduce ourselves to the class and everybody gives us their name and we explain what the class is going to be like. We close out with this idea that historically I am going to be challenging the prevailing narratives. Basically, much of what they've learned about history to this point is mythological, whether we're talking about the United States or the world or whatever. And that's great. And Nick's going to challenge their ideas regarding social theory and how people have been organized and the prevailing thoughts of our current era. And that's great. We're going to challenge them. And so we close with this thought: nothing of any consequence comes from a place of comfort, and we're here to make you uncomfortable. Well, now it's time for us to actually have a little bit of that feeling, and that's why we decided to develop this podcast. So we are going to explore things outside of our traditional historical and sociological contexts, which after a while, doing this for 7-8 years each at this point, you do get a little bit static in your way of thinking and maybe fall back on old theories that no longer work, whether we're talking about sociological theories or we're talking about specific structural ways of looking at history. It gets a little bit stale. And so that's what we're hoping to do here with this podcast is push ourselves outside of our comfort zones a little bit so that we can develop a new class.
So our main questions that we're going to be investigating, both in the podcast and our goal for the new class that we're developing, we really want to analyze, can a stateless society exist? And that's our main sort of research question. And then the second one is, if so, how would we get there? And we really want to be specific in focusing, how would we get from modern advanced industrial society to some manifestation of a stateless society, a society without coercive, exploitative hierarchy. So that's really what we're going to set out trying to explore. The podcast, I'm assuming, will morph over time as we further ourselves in this research. I'm sure that we'll take detours into probably some episodes related to the ideology class that we teach, or maybe some episodes that are more focused in revolutionary theory, etc. But that's really what we're starting out with, is to sort of explore the possibilities of a stateless society. And I do want to emphasize that we're going to spend a lot of time probably at the theoretical realm. That's really where my focus is and my passion, backed up by real-world examples that will be provided mostly by Jared and any of the guests that we bring on. But really the goal for both of us is to come to some sort of conclusion after being armed with that knowledge for what effective praxis looks like in real life. What actions can people take, whether that's on an individual or a collective scale, to sort of motivate our societies to get to a state that would free those that are oppressed, really free everyone from this oppression that is affluent society, to use the Frankfurt School's terms. So I think that's good for the first episode. Hope you guys will continue this journey with us. You can find us online at revolutionandideology.com. So we hope that you'll be with us throughout the journey. You can also contact us if you ever wanted to at hello@revolutionandideology.com. Send us what you think we should be talking about, resources that we need to read. If you're an expert on some topic that you think we might want to touch on and you'd like to appear on the podcast, for sure reach out. We will be talking to you guys again soon.